Now let's look at how do we enter into a foreign market? And there's so many choices, and this is probably one of my favorite chapters. If we find a new product and service while we're traveling abroad or one here at home, how do we enter that foreign market? What we're going to look at is the issues that a company must examine when considering entering the realm of international trade. In essence, how do I enter these international markets, these foreign marketplaces? We're going to talk about how we make that entry, including the challenges and the ramifications of indirect exporting. Also, we'll look at people who want to do active exporting, where they use agents or distributors, or maybe even their own direct marketing subsidiaries, also known as like a sales subsidiary. And then we'll look at the engagement of, do we produce here locally or should we be producing abroad? In the area of production abroad, what we want to do is examine licensing, franchising, maybe establishing a JV or joint venture, and look at wholly owned subsidiaries, also known as WOFIs, wholly owned foreign enterprises. And then we're going to look at the challenge, though, of pricing. When you're set up an international business, are you going to run into problems with parallel imports, also known as gray markets, and take advantage of foreign trade zones? So this will be exciting and long chapter, but one that we can use looking at the supply chain, how we enter a foreign market. There are a lot of choices here. When entering any new market outside of your domestic market, there are a lot of variables you got to consider. But first, let's look at in international sales. Unfortunately, it tends to be reactive, random, or even like a haphazard event. Really, what you need is a strategy. Firms then eventually realize, hey, wow, this international market, people who've been buying our products in international markets, has a lot of potential. Maybe we should explore this more. And eventually, they go aggressively with a strategy into the international market, but they fail to plan. And planning is the key. At the end of the day, if we can't plan when we go into international market, our chances of success are really limited. Some variables we want to look at is, how big is the market? Right now, you hear a lot about Brazil, Russia, India, and China, and all their potential. And those markets have tremendous potential. I have pretty big investments myself in our office in Shanghai and in Sao Paulo, Brazil. But these are growing markets. Other markets that are more mature, like Germany, France, the United States, or Japan, they may not have the growth, but the actual size of the market for your product or service may be more appropriate. Then we look at the growth of the market. How big is this market, and is it growing? And in an industry or a market segment, can your product grow within that market? Growth potential is critical, especially when entering a foreign market. At the same time, is if we have a product or a service we're taking abroad, what type of product should it be? And what is our real market potential? All too often I hear people state, hey, I'm going to enter the Japanese market. It's a $100 million market, and we're going to go after 5% share. Now, 5% is a low nominal number, but when you're going into a developed market like Japan, 5% may be realistic after 2 or 3 years. It's not necessarily going to happen. You have to be realistic with your numbers, because that type of forecasting will determine what type of investment you might have. And then if you're representing a company or an exporter, which is a supplier, are they really going to support you? Are they going to get involved? Does your opportunity to bring a product to an overseas market, are they going to support it with customer service? Are they going to support it with technical information? Are they going to use the same marketing? Will they be there for you in the long run? What you don't want to do is then middleman or an importer find out that the actual manufacturer has only a short-term sight after you've invested a lot of money. And then understand the business environment, the characteristics of the importing country. Maybe they have different standards. Maybe they have different cultural use. All of these can be very important. For example, if a product comes through customs, in America, it gets through customs usually in 2 or 3 days. However, in some countries, it may be 3 or 4 weeks. Understand those variables, and then also have, like all good goals, a time component. What's the time horizon? When do we want to get our return on our investment? When is this market going to grow where we can take advantage of it? In all these cases, you really want to have a long-term strategy. And all too often, when entering a new market, the best decision is not entering. But if you do this type of due diligence before you try and enter a market, you can be much more successful. Now, when entering a foreign market, we need to make sure we have a good international strategy early on. And part of our marketing mix, the 4 P's: price, product, promotion, and place. Place being distribution. When you're looking at international sales, distribution is one with the longest timeline and is the least likely to be adjusted in the long run. When you're picking partners, be it an agent or a distributor or even a joint venture, take your time because these partnerships aren't easily changed, as well as can have long-term implications. Now, let's look at this. If we're going to enter a new market, the company needs to decide whether their market factors favor making the product at home. We should make it here in California. Or maybe we should manufacture abroad. Canada, Japan, Brazil, China, Korea, or Taiwan. Well, let's first look at what we'll make it at home. If we're manufacturing here, are we going to have an indirect or passive export strategy, or are we going to actively export? These are key questions we want to consider. Now, what is the difference between indirect versus active exporting? It's somewhat simple. Indirect exporting is reactive and or a passive way. The exporter really isn't trying to grow his business internationally. They're not looking for sales. Basically, they're going to focus on their local market, Orange County, California, the West Coast, the East Coast, and they're going to leave exporting to the experts. It's a good short-term strategy, but really if you're going to do international business in the long term, it may not be your best method of entering foreign markets. Active exporting strategically is, hey, we understand that we want to find markets abroad. We want to enter foreign markets. We have consumers, clients, companies that could use our product and services. So this is really the best option for large firms or firms with international experience. It should be part of a strategy because in active exporting, you're learning quite a bit as you grow. Now in indirect exporting or passive exporting, we're going to look at 3 major methodologies. 1, using an export trading company, which are usually larger firms. We'll look at export management corporations, which are usually smaller firms, and then piggybacking. Yes, piggybacking just like a child jumping on your back. Now let's first look at an export trading company in the industry called an ETC. An export trading company, they purchase goods from a firm in one country and resell them in a foreign country. Now for the domestic seller, it's like a domestic transaction, a sale to a company in the home country. So a manufacturer here in Irvine may sell to an ETC here in Southern California, making the whole transaction domestic. For the foreign party purchasing the product from the export trading company, it's also a domestic transaction. It's a purchase from a company in the same country. So if these goods or services were sold here locally, then shipped overseas, let's say China, the export trading company would be in China and they would sell locally to Chinese companies. Another local transaction using local language and local currencies. It's really an older concept. The sailing ships between London and India and Hong Kong, it really ended in the 19th century, but was resurrected by Japan to handle its, post-World War II exporting and entering into the market. Now, these are usually really large companies. They have a huge depth of knowledge of the markets, products, both foreign and abroad. They need to have locations in multiple markets, and that takes a large investment. But with that investment, they provide packages of varied logistical services. Getting products from one country to another isn't necessarily easy. Shipping, insuring, financing, and expediting the international transaction. They understand the regulatory environments in both the countries. They understand the customs and traditions. Now, there are some smaller companies get involved in this, usually more niche-oriented companies. They're small and they have a specialty in one geographic or maybe in just one type of product. They offer similar services to the larger companies, but again, it's very niche-oriented. Now, in the U.S., we had a Export Trading Company Act in 1982, which helped create a lot of smaller scale export trading companies here in the U.S. Now, these ETCs, again, are passive. If you're the supplier and you have a long-term strategy, an export trading company might not be the best for you because if you're going to be serious about growing your business internationally, you're not going to have any access to that foreign market down the road. Now, if you look here at the slide, Firm 1 in country A, they're selling their product domestically like a local transaction to an ETC in that country. The big black arrow reflects that same ETC company transfers to its sister company in country B, and they then sell to Firm 2, another domestic transaction. For Firm 1 and Firm 2, this is really easy business because it's like doing business domestically. But if you're the manufacturer here or this exporter and you have long-term ambitions, export trading companies may not be your best method because you're not going to have any information about that foreign market. Now, let's look at another passive method, an export management company or export management corporation, an EMC. Now, export management corporations, they're also located in the domestic or exporting country, and they really act as the international manufacturer's representative. They provide the consulting expertise, the knowledge of the foreign market. And unlike an export trading company, an ETC, the Export Management Corporation is an agent. They're a true representative. And agents do not take title of the property being sold. So if they're entering a foreign market and you have an EMC working with you, or you are an EMC, you are usually located in the domestic market near the manufacturer and providing them consultative advice how to enter that market, and how you get paid is a commission. So you might set up a contract with a company saying, for the next 3 years, all products sold into this foreign market, we get a certain percentage. We'll represent you. We'll help you grow your business internationally. EMCs tend to be small companies. In a lot of ways, my company, HSI, we act like an EMC with certain customers. We help them enter the foreign market. We might do market research for them. We may get a retainer, or we get a percentage of all business that enters that foreign market because we're providing them expertise and access to our clients. And you have to be specialized in selling one product line in one country. But at the same time, you also usually want to find an EMC that has complementary products because they'll be calling on similar customers as opposed to having competitive products. And the EMC's real strength is their knowledge of that market, of the potential importers or distributors, how the regulations work to make everything move more smoothly. Now, what's different also between an export trading company and an export management corporation is an exporter tends to be more involved in the international activity when using an EMC. They're more closely involved. And when using an ETC, you lose all market knowledge because it's a domestic transaction. Whereas with an EMC, an export management corporation, the transaction between the importer in the foreign country and the exporter in the domestic country, that transaction still takes place because, remember, the EMC never takes ownership of the goods, never has title. They're just a true representative. So when using an EMC, that relationship is key. There's a lot of trust. And eventually, if the business grows, the exporter has a tendency to want to swallow or buy out the EMC and absorb them into their business. And at times, you have to be careful. If you're an export management corporation, make sure that the exporter and importer start to think Do we really need that EMC anymore? And they try to bypass you. Usually this doesn't happen, but there are some unscrupulous players out there that may do that. So when doing international business, make sure your contract is enforceable. Make sure you're protected for the amount of services you're doing. Now, if you look at this drawing, you can see what's very different between an ETC and an EMC is that in an export management corporation, the goods are directly shipped from the exporter to the importer. And the importer directly pays the exporter. So they already have a relationship. They know about each other. How the EMC is making money is they usually will earn a commission from the exporter for all sales in the importer's country, and their job is to sell, find the importers, find more importers, and increase sales. It becomes mutually beneficial as long as they always grow together. Okay, now let's look at piggybacking. Simply put, piggybacking refers to the possibility of a small firm having to piggyback on another firm's efforts to enter a foreign market. For example, a firm's customer may open a manufacturing facility abroad, let's say Ireland, and request that that firm continue to sell its products to that new facility. The firm ends up being an exporter, even though it never sought to enter this market. A firm utilizes then the other company's distribution channels abroad to sell its products. It uses another company's experience to sell its products abroad. In either case, the firm piggybacked on the other strategy. Right here you see Zebra Company moving to Ireland and its suppliers who sells to Zebra USA then selling into Ireland. Now the question or challenge may be, do you have the staff? Do you have the language skills? Do you have the capabilities to proactively go into another market or reactively enter that market? It can be a stress on your current infrastructure, but it could also be a great opportunity. But in this case, it is still a passive way into international business. There is no strategy. It's reacting to its clients' moves. This happens all too often and probably not the best way to do international business. Now let's look at companies who want to proactively enter the international market. There are a lot of different methodologies or channels to use, but we're going to focus on an agent, a distributor, or a sales subsidiary. In the world of agents, an agent is typically a small firm or even an individual who has its own company, and it's located usually in the importing country. Now this agent will act as a representative, and that's a key word. They act as a representative of the manufacturer or the exporter. He or she will not take title of the goods, so therefore they earn a commission on the export. So you can see here in this picture, the exporter and the importer work directly, and the agent gets its commission by supporting the exporter's business in the foreign country. They in essence sell. Now the principal is the party being represented by the agent, the factory in most cases. And an agent usually would want to represent multiple companies manufacturing similar products that complement each other. So they will have the same reason to call on key industrial contacts. And that will obviously help the exporter. What you want to make sure is when you hire an agent, they don't sell competitive products. Because if they sell competitive products, they no longer really represent you, but they actually start representing their client or the importer. For example, hi, would you like to buy my doors? I have Chinese doors, Japanese doors, American doors, Canadian doors. You pick, you tell me which one. All of them have their pluses and their minuses. Higher price, higher quality, higher warranty, faster delivery. In that case, the agent really is just supporting the importer and not its manufacturer. So you want to find an agent who is selling complementary goods. Now, in the agent relationship, the advantage of an agent is if they sell nothing, you pay nothing. So you may have just given them some brochures, some price lists, or maybe have even supported them more extensively. In the agent world, it is an expensive way to spread your distribution channel with minimal risk. Now, let's look at a distributor though. The distributor is typically located in the importing country as well, but they're actually buying the product from you. They're going to take title of the goods from the exporter. And this relationship is really two types of invoices. One will be the international invoices between the manufacturer slash exporter and the distributor, who is also going to act as an importer in these cases. Then, from the distributor's perspective in the foreign country, they'll have another set of domestic invoices between the distributor and its customers. So, any consumer in the foreign market will see these foreign products as a domestic sale. Now, what makes this a great relationship is that the distributor is, in some sense, your client. There is a physical transaction. They are taking title of the goods. At the same time, though, they are representing your marketing, they're representing your products in a foreign market. So the distributor is going to have to take on more risk. They have title, they have inventory, probably should have some spare parts, should also look at doing some after service sales support. They would also want to have complementary products, just like in the agent relationships. And they might even have some that compete with yours. Now, since the distributor takes more risk, has higher costs than the agent relationship, such as inventory costs, etc., they're going to want more support from the manufacturer. They're going to want training. They're going to want sales support. They're going to want even better pricing. Because you can see in this model, the exporter and the customer, they're really not communicating with each other. As in the previous model, the importer and the exporter with the agents directly worked with each other. Now, the distributor usually has benefits agents don't have. More freedom in setting its prices, but as a manufacturer, you may want to control that. They'll also have more freedom in negotiating with their customers. But it's basically limited to copyrights and trademarks in ways that the contract is set up, which we'll discuss in the next chapter. These contracts can dictate the scope of work for either an agent or a distributor. But when you have a distributor, you definitely have somebody who has quote unquote skin in the game. They have to make a substantial investment. They got to train their employees. They want to see you succeed because they have spent money on your product, shipped it, it's now in their warehouse. There's, in essence, money burning in their pockets. Now, distributors need to be able to accurately represent you when you're talking to customers. You do not want to have a distributor who changes your marketing strategy. You do not want a distributor who goes rogue and starts to represent your product inappropriately. A distributor also needs to be able to invest in the exporter's products. They need to be able to sell the products. You don't want it just to sit on their shelf. So you need to make sure that they're able to sell, and that's where you come in for training. They also have to be knowledgeable about the industry, but also very knowledgeable about your product, and can they provide service? You really don't want someone in a foreign country trying to call back to headquarters in the US in this example to get customer service. We need local service support. And the distributor needs to have objectives that are similar to the manufacturer. If you have a distributor who has a different objective than yours, you're really destined to failure in the long run. You need to find that partner, that distributor who is going on the same paths that you are. Now, finding distributors, like agents, can be in trade shows, trade missions, talking to the U.S. commercial office for American companies, or using your industry contacts. But a distributor is a long-term investment. They are your partner. You need to treat them like a partner. You need to almost treat them like a subsidiary. And the challenge is, how much do you share with them, and how much will they share with you? The more trust you can build between the two, the more successful this relationship will be, and both parties will make a lot of money. Now, in some countries, they're not going to allow agents because they don't want them to represent foreign countries, or sometimes you can't have an agent because, simply put, they need to have inventory, and that will require distribution, or they need after-service sales support, and then again, you will require a distributor in theirs. But there's also some judicial issues we must concern, or legal issues. Agents, since they're typically smaller companies, are often protected by governments throughout the world, and these countries protect them by having disputes between the exporter and the agency governed by labor law, as opposed to contract law, where in most cases a distributor and an exporter, their relationship falls under contract law. Now, contract law simply says the contract between the distributor and the exporter is taken to the courts, and the courts determine if one party broke the agreement. It's not going to determine if it was a fair agreement or not. Labor law, on the other hand, it will put certain limits on the way the contracts between agents and exporters can be worded and even enforced. I'll talk a little bit more about this in the contract section. So be careful about when you're choosing an agent or distributor. Make sure you also include the legal issues that could be involved in this decision. Okay, now let's look at a marketing subsidiary. A marketing subsidiary is basically a direct foreign investment by the exporter into the importing country. You set up your own office. Now, at the beginning of this class and throughout the rest of this class, I always want you to think about you only have limited funds. A company, if they invest in China, that means they can't expand their business in the United States because there's only so much money. Or if they go to China, they can't go to Brazil. If they go in Brazil, they can't go in Japan. So there are major decisions. So when we look at this, let's make sure we're looking at this in real time. So if we want to go into a country and set up a marketing subsidiary, it's going to be expensive. It's going to have a large investment. The exporter will own a sales or marketing office in that foreign country. And since it's incorporated in the importing country or the foreign country, it is the importer of record. So you're basically transferring goods from the headquarters or exporting country to the importing country through this marketing subsidiary. Now, this is a very legal way to do business, and all sales now in the importing country are directly from the subsidiary to domestic consumers. However, please understand there are a lot of costs that have to be considered, such as fixed cost, real estate, inventory, employees, not to mention all the local taxes you'll have to pay. Whereas an agent, they're really a variable cost. You don't pay anything if they don't sell anything. Hence, commissions are the only real risk besides some stationery or brochures you might have to send. Distributors, on their side, they really invest and they bear all the costs. So you have funds possibly to go into more markets if you use an agent or a distributor type relationship. Now, when you think of it that way, why would you ever want to set up a sales or marketing subsidiary? Well, one thing that is great about a marketing subsidiary is it builds institutional knowledge within the company, meaning all the mistakes, all the successes, all the experiences stay within the company in that marketplace. If you have a long-term plan to stay in a market, the ideal scenario is having a marketing subsidiary. You can learn, you have continual improvement, continual growth, and you get that institutional memory. You can hire top employees from competitor firms. You can work with the best distributors and agents as well. It gives you that local knowledge for long-term business practices, something an agent or distributor relationship really can't do. Now the question is, which strategy do you choose, or how do you coordinate different strategies? A firm can take different approaches to enter a market because it could be market driven, company driven, or even product driven. And some people take the approach when entering a foreign market by exporting through standardization. What they'll do is have a specific strategy they follow for all exporting. It's really attractive because, one, it simplifies export management. It's the same for everybody. It provides a unified marketing front, very easy to market your products. You have the same type of people. It also creates camaraderie among the agencies throughout the world. And you can develop a similar standard for all of their import entities. Agents, subsidiaries can coordinate prices and control after-sale policies. Distributors can contractually control prices. All of these things can be something they can easily do for multiple locations. Always have a sales subsidiary in every location. Always have an agent in every location, or always have a distributor. It's a simplified approach. It's a standard approach. Now, the disadvantage though is this one size fits all. Maybe it just might give you the wrong partner in the wrong market. You may have a sales subsidiary, which is a lot of capital investment in a small market. Or you may have an agent or distributor in a key market, and now you can't open up a sales distributor. Or If you have an agents only policy, maybe in some countries distributors are better. Or if you have a distributor owned policy, maybe agents are more important. So when you have a one fits all, it really has its disadvantages as well. Let me give you an example. If you're trying to sell to big box or retail chains in the United States, you usually want to have a broker or an agent introduce you to the right buyer for that particular big box or retailer. CVS, Walgreens, Home Depot, Walmart, etc. Now, if you're a foreign country and you had a distributor only policy and you said, I want to work with the number one distributor in America who sells to big box and retailers in the US market, you would get possibly a poor match. When you listed out all of the best contacts, best channels to get to retailers and big boxes, maybe the best distributor doesn't even make the top 100. So you may have a poor match. Likewise, if you're an American who uses brokers or agents to enter the big box or retailer market, when you open up an office in Brazil and you say we only use agents and brokers, you would find out that usually these big box companies actually work with large distributors. They're not agent relationships. It's the opposite of the US market. So you might again find a poor match. So you might want to then take a more tailored approach. Now, when you take a tailored approach, you're going to have different strategies in different markets. In essence, you can pick the best strategy for each country, and usually your profits will be higher. Now, the disadvantage is you're going to have a lot more work. You're going to have a lot more personnel costs because you're going to have to customize things for every marketplace. But in the long run, it can be beneficial. But once you do take a certain strategy, it's very hard to move from an agent or a distributor into a sales subsidiary, meaning you're knocking the others out of the market. Because one, these agents and distributors, they've invested a lot of money to grow your business. They probably have some impressive customer loyalty, and there might be a drop in sales when you change type of management teams. And finally, they may take you to court. Or in an agent's perspective, they may take you to the Department of Labor. And that'll be a legal issue that you might not want to deal with. So choosing the right partner and the right channel is a long-term perspective. Take your time to make the right choice. Now, we talked about exporting, but sometimes we want to produce abroad. You may want to produce abroad because maybe manufacturing costs are lower. You may want to produce abroad is maybe your international customers in a particular marketplace are there and you can take advantage of tax incentive or being closer to your customers. You may want to produce abroad when your domestic manufacturing has reached its capacity. There are a lot of different reasons that you may want to produce abroad. And there also are several choices. You can look at contract manufacturing. You can look at licensing, franchising, setting up a joint venture, or setting up a manufacturing subsidiary. We're going to look at each one of these and look at the pros and cons to make a good choice when entering a foreign market. Now, contract manufacturing, also known as subcontracting, is a way a company can enter into an agreement with a foreign company to manufacture its goods abroad. For example, maybe there's an American publisher who will hire a British publisher to print its books in Britain instead of shipping them from the United States. It makes them closer to their British or maybe even their European customers. Or maybe a French cement company, like the example on the slide here, may contract a Chinese cement manufacturer to sell cement under the French company's name in China. So contract manufacturing is a way for a firm to get its products in a foreign country, either when there are barriers to entry, such as a quota, taxes, or duties, or when the transportation costs are just too high for that goods. For example, in cement, you don't really want to be shipping sand around the world. Now, you can use licensing also to enter into a foreign market. A company who has intellectual property may use this to get into another market. So the company or the licensor allows another firm, the licensee, to use its intellectual property, which are copyrights, maybe trademarks, patents, in exchange for a fee, and that fee we call a royalty. Now, the license can allow the use of this patented technology or its trademark brand name, especially popular brands like Nike or Bosch, or even a trade secret. The licensor retains ownership of its intellectual property at all times, and the licensee must pay the licensor a fee every time it's used, such as a song every time it's sung, a book every time it's sold. A writer might get a royalty. All intellectual property is at risk of being copied or stolen in countries where intellectual property is not well protected, so you need to be careful. Having a good licensing agreement does not necessarily increase that risk, but what it does is it will protect you. Also, you may choose which markets you may want to go to if you're going to license. If you believe that your intellectual property will not be protected, I highly suggest not getting into a licensing agreement. Now, saying that, I've been with many countries and companies that have used licensing to share brand names, to share copyrights, to share trademarks, and it can be a very profitable line of business as long as you have trust and your intellectual property can be protected. You can also enter markets with franchising. We've all heard the term, but let's walk through it. Basically, franchising is similar to licensing, but it really involves a bundle or a package of intellectual property items. For example, Firm a franchisor, will allow an entire business model to be used by another firm, a franchisee, in exchange for royalties. Now, the intellectual property here includes a large number of related trademarks, copyrights, patents, know how, training, and methods of operation. Franchising works best for maybe like retail establishments requiring a uniform appearance for consumers to build confidence, to build loyalty, and are most popular with fast food restaurants such as McDonald's, KFC, or even Subway. So franchising is a package of goods, and it's a package of intellectual property. A lot of times it's the know-how. How do you run a business? How do you recreate this model? And that's how they sell a package of intellectual property is through a franchising model. And it's a great way to enter a market, particularly if the franchisor is a popular brand. Now, you can also set up a joint venture. A lot of times you hear a joint venture as a marriage between companies. I like to think of it more as having offspring. Two, three, or four companies coming together and creating a new company, a joint venture. A joint venture is really a firm created and jointly owned by multiple companies. It's created when two or three exporters want to share the cost of investing in a facility abroad. Often the joint owners are companies manufacturing complementary product lines, maybe even in the franchise models. Sometimes an exporter wants a local partner to provide capital and knowledge of the market, and some countries require local partnerships for foreign investment in areas they may want to gain technological knowledge for the domestic labor force. It may be an area they want to protect, such as the food chain, the supply. So these joint ventures are a partnership, but a creation of a new entity. Now, joint ventures were really popular in the 90s. Everybody had to have them, particularly in some of the developing countries, such as the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, and China. And joint ventures work well while the relationship is strong. Unfortunately, the two entities will often grow in different directions over time, and the joint venture will suffer and possibly dissolve. And that takes millions of dollars to unravel. It's like any relationship. Initially, there's a lot of attraction. I want to move to the Japanese market. I meet someone in Japan who also wants to be there. I am amazed by their knowledge of the Japanese marketplace, their contacts with labor, their ability to get skilled management, and they're also amazed at our management practices, our technology, and our product line. But over years, this slowly fades away. I start to understand the Japanese market, and I'm not as impressed on their knowledge. So maybe I've got up to 80% of what their level of knowledge is of that market. And likewise, the technology that awed them that I was bringing to the table, or the product that I had, isn't as impressive as it once was because they're more aware of competitive products. They're more aware of how this product works. So if we don't keep on improving the relationship and growing together, we'll slowly grow apart, and that will really hurt this joint venture. And it's the reason most of these joint ventures fail. And here, this slide is another view of how a joint venture may work, where an Italian firm will come into China, match up with a Chinese firm to create a new venture to sell or enter the Chinese market. Whereas the previous slide had three foreign firms working together to enter a market. In all cases, it's relational, and these relationships need to grow together, otherwise, they're going to fail. And they're not near as popular as they were in the 80s and 90s. And a lot of foreign investors find that joint ventures are simply not as attractive as they once were because of the risk of the joint venture failing. Now, what's becoming more and more popular is what we call a wholly owned foreign enterprise, which is a subsidiary. Just like the marketing subsidiary we talked about before, this is a manufacturing subsidiary. And although it's called a wholly owned foreign enterprise, really what you hear them is called a woofie. That's the common term you'll hear in the marketplace. I'm going to set up a woofie. And this subsidiary can really be an independent company just established but in a foreign country, but still wholly owned by the exporting company. The subsidiary allows the foreign firm to retain complete control of its foreign investment. It doesn't have to deal with the politics of a partnership. And it bears all the costs, which can be heavy. Remember, we have limited funds, but also bears all the profit. Now, if you have a lot of intellectual property that you're worried will be stolen or not protected, having a woofie gives you that control so you don't have to fear your knowledge will be leaving out the back door. This strategy is normally followed by well-established large companies because the costs associated with creating a subsidiary are very high. So if you do a subsidiary in China, it's going to keep you from opening up distribution, agent arms in other locations because of the cost alone. But if the market's worth it, you want total control and you want to reap all the profits for long-term gain, maybe a subsidiary or woofie is the way to go. Now, there are other things that will come up, such as making decisions on pricing. Will it create parallel imports, or what's known as create a gray market? What happens when you have counterfeit goods or counterfeit raw materials, or you purchase counterfeit goods or sell counterfeit goods? How do you take advantage of a foreign trade zone, and what is it? And then look at the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act of the United States. And you find that not everyone in the world plays by the same rules. Now, parallel imports or gray market can happen for a variety of reasons. For some firms, they'll sell goods in different markets at different prices. And there's a lot of good reasons to do that, and a lot of people believe in this strategy. These different methods of entry, because of different characteristics of certain martins, or there's varying exchange rates. Should I be selling my product the same price in Japan as I do in China, or Brazil as I do in Spain? Well, if you do have different prices, as you can see by this model here, entrepreneurs will often buy the goods in the country which is the lowest price and then sell them in the country with the higher price. In order to do that, they buy the good from the normal distribution channel, but sell through an alternative channel of distribution that are not normally the channels that company might use. Now, this phenomenon we would call a parallel import or gray market. And it's really difficult for manufacturers or exporters to fight these parallel imports as they are meeting market demands, and it's legal because when you sell a product to someone, you have lost title of the goods, you have lost control of the goods. So when you're selling at different prices, be careful you're not completing different channel conflict. Now, what I mean by that is, let's give you an example. When I first got involved in international business around 20 years ago, I met a gentleman who found an opportunity. Purina, as in Purina dog food, was selling through a wholly owned market subsidiary in Japan, Purina dog food. At that time, Japan had a very sophisticated but very, very thick distribution system. They would have the master distributor, sub distributors, regional distributors, dealers, to agents, then to potentially the retailer at the consumer level. Although it was a very sophisticated methodology because so many people were taking a cut of the action. And I give this as more of an illustrative example because at that time I'm not sure how many people were involved in the Purina dog food distribution chain in Japan. But by the time it got to the retailer, the price was pretty expensive. We were able to go to Costco, buy the same dog food from Purina that was being sold in the US, and sell container loads of this to Japan directly to the retailers at almost half the price they were buying it from the traditional Japanese distribution channel. They had created a gray market. The price at the retail level was so much more expensive in Japan that it made entrepreneurs like ourselves gave us an opportunity to ship containers of goods up into the Japanese market. What do you think about, or what do you think the feelings were from the Japanese distributors, wholesalers, the subsidiary? They were extremely upset, but they didn't know who we were. None of the retailers would give our names. It was legal too. Eventually, they figured out it was coming from Costco, and eventually, Purina gave Costco incentives, meaning paid them off to no longer sell Purina dog food in container amounts. Now, that was a gray market opportunity, and we legally sold product to take advantage of this price differential. Now, here's another example. For example, selling product in Europe. Maybe you have a great water product and you're looking for different opportunities. In the Spanish market, you find a great wholesaler, a distributor, who will sell your product. And he's just going to buy it, store it, and reactively sell it to the marketplace. It's not a large market to you, and they'll sell it for maybe 3.5 euros in this example. Whereas Germany, with its large population, sophisticated channels, you find the ideal partner. The Germans are going to invest heavily in the promotion of the product. They're going to sponsor soccer teams. They're going to advertise. They're going to sell to the largest retailers in the marketplace. They're going to have to go through regulations. They're going to have to go through testing, approval, clinical trials, all these things that will make your product really succeed in the German market. They are paralleling your strategy maybe back in your home country, such as the United States. Well, they're doing everything you want, and they're going to really grow the business. They're going to bleed with you. They're going to bleed your company's colors. Well, since it's the European Union, products can go freely across borders. Now, maybe a tourist like myself is in Germany and found this great brand, and I bought the water because I liked it. It was 6 euros. Through my travels, I train over to Spain and I see I can buy it for $3.50 or 3.5 euros in Spain. Well, that's a pretty big price gap. Then any entrepreneur buys this product at the cheaper price in Spain and they just ship it to Germany legally. And even though I can mark it up, say in this example to 4.25 euros, you know, I'm going to make money, the retailer is going to make money, and the consumer is going to get the product at a cheaper price. And it's still the same branded product, but maybe just was in Spanish. This is going to upset your partner. It's going to upset the retailers, and you're going to really disillusion what could have been a great partner. And it's very hard to prove this. You don't know who sold it. So having different pricing strategy is a very risky business. Make sure that if you're going to take this risk, your rewards definitely outweigh the chance of losing a great partner such as this German distributor. Okay? Something to think about. Now here's examples of some counterfeit goods, and these are pretty obvious. But counterfeit goods could be consumer goods like these, but also industrial goods can be counterfeit. And the largest culprits are, countries that are growing fast where protecting intellectual property isn't their largest priority, even though it should be. Maybe they don't have the resources to stop this, but countries like China, India, Russia, etc. have had some challenges with controlling counterfeit goods within their borders. And these tangible goods, software, can also be food products or health products where actually people's lives can be in danger. So counterfeit goods, they really do hurt the consumer because they're poor quality. They really never hurt the counterfeiters unless they're caught, and they definitely damage the brands. The brands are really damaged because some people can't tell the difference and they just say, this brand is quote unquote cheap. Now, counterfeit goods can represent problems for almost any country in the world. You can find counterfeit goods in LA, Chicago, New York City, as much as you can in China, Russia, or India. And it's because people want the image, but they don't want to pay the price. Now, you want to have goods, make sure your inputs in your manufacturing process aren't counterfeit. We've seen that a lot in manufacturing facilities around the world. They thought they're buying one thing and they're buying something else. Likewise, if you're selling consumer goods, make sure they're not easily counterfeited. Make sure your manufacturer protects your patents. Make sure the country has a legal system to protect that intellectual property, because counterfeit goods will definitely damage your brand. Now, we also have foreign trade zones, or FTZs. These FTZs were created to encourage exporting and foreign investment. Although an FTZ is in a country, as far as the customs, the government, and local taxation is concerned, these FTZs are considered to be quote-unquote outside of the country, so they're not taxed or not dutied. These goods can be then imported into a free trade zone, duty-free. They can be transformed, assembled, repackaged even, and then shipped elsewhere to another country without ever having been considered to be in the country where the foreign trade zone is located. Now, products from this foreign trade zone sold to the host country are only subject to duties when they leave that trade zone. So once it goes through the trade zone, it would pay duties like a normal import. And we'll talk about this later in the course, how you get through a customs clearance and what it means to enter another country. And this helps them stimulate more foreign investment, it creates local jobs, and it helps the local economy get higher technical skills. There's training involved. And it's attractive to the manufacturers who are subject to tariffs on the raw materials or have to carry inventory for a large region. For example, you may have a foreign trade zone in Shanghai, China. The labor's inexpensive. They'll manufacture the goods there. They'll inventory it, then reship it out to other parts of the region, such as Australia, Korea, Japan, or Taiwan. So foreign trade zones can be a very important strategic advantage you may want to take advantage of just for the duty implications alone. Now, something that I unfortunately have to bring up is the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. The fact is, throughout the world, bribing of government officials is a common and accepted form of conducting business. Bribing purchasing managers, corruption. Now, a lot of people play in this game, and a lot of countries, if you want to do business, you're going to have to get involved in this through partnerships or otherwise. But make sure you understand, in the United States, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, or FCPA of the U.S., states explicitly that if you bribe, your company will be punished, and so will the individuals involved in that. So it is against the law in the U.S. to have use bribery to win business. Now, years ago, 10, 15 years ago, many other developed countries, a lot of them in Europe, this would be part of their business plan. I'm going to put 3% aside in my income statement for bribery. However, now, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which we call the OECD, has also implemented an anti-bribery convention, which almost all countries have adopted, and it basically criminalizing the practice of bribery. You got to be aware that doing international business, bribery and corruption exists. It exists in this country as well. And if you partake in it, like in the U.S., and get caught, you will be punished. So be careful, because not all countries follow the same practices as we do here. Hopefully, you will never have to deal with it, and it's just some silly concept that an instructor had to share with you.